Welcome everyone to our fourth class in this series of the S'dei Chemed, the section as it applies to Bnei Noach. Once again, we are in volume 8, page 32, 14, left-hand column, right in the middle, the new paragraph beginning with the big word gam. So this is in Siman Vav, and the category starts off with goy. It's in alphabetical order. So in this encyclopedia, we are up to the word goy. The part that we're in right now, we've been doing for the past number of classes, is a very lengthy, detailed, and somewhat complicated discussion. We are in the middle of discussing shiurim, measurements, amounts. Do they or do they not apply to Bnei Noach as they apply to Jews, to Bnei Yisrael? When it comes to Jewish people, so in order to be liable for transgressing, in order to be liable to get the punishment, so the person needs to have, if it's food, if the prohibition is eating, he needs to have consumed a certain amount, usually the amount referred to as a kizayis, which goes by volume, and it's about 1 ounce, maybe a bit less than an ounce. Otherwise, with some exceptions, but as a rule, if a Jew would, God forbid, consume something which is forbidden for a Jew to eat, known as non-kosher, and he had less than that prescribed amount of a kazayis, whatever the penalty would be, he would not get it. Whether it's in the times when the court would administer the punishment, which in most cases would be the 39 lashes, or whether it is a penalty of the heavenly court, which would apply nowadays as well, so long as the individual ate less than the prescribed amount of the kazayis, although what he did was wrong, it's not punishable. Question is, when we're speaking about the non-Jew, the Ben Noach, who is not allowed to eat Eiver min hachai, a limb or a part of an animal that was detached from the animal while the animal was still living. So, in his laws, from the Torah perspective, is it also a measurement of a kazayis, or is it the minutest amount? And we've spent several hours discussing that. And this is very fine print with lots of references, and we're basically going back and forth, bringing different opinions as to whether it does or does not apply to Bnei Noach. We mentioned the Rambam, and then we mentioned another commentary, the Tosfos. When it comes to Bnei Noach, when it comes to Bnei Yisrael, to the Jewish people, so one argument is that shiurim, measurements, is something which is very specifically given to the Jews. And although it's not written in the written law, but it was orally given, part of the oral tradition that God said to Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu. Now, how do we know then that the less than that amount is still forbidden? Maybe it's not only for the punishment, but even for the prohibition. So we learn that out from a particular word in the Torah, the word koil, that says all or any. That teaches us that even though, in order to be punished, it has to be at least that particular amount, but any amount is still forbidden. All right. And then we mentioned that in the Talmud, there is actually an argument between two of the sages of the Talmud, Reish Lakish and Reb Yochanan, as to whether less than a measurement is biblically forbidden. So now the question is, what about the Ben Noyach? So the argument goes back and forth. One way to look at it is that measurements only are for the Jewish people, and B'nai Noyach are forbidden for the slightest amount, and the punishment, whatever the penalty is, it's all the same. No difference between whether the Ben Noyach ate a tiny sliver or whether he ate a big 10-pound piece. No difference, unless you want to say that every tiny amount is a prohibition, so he's just multiply that and increase that, all the more so. Or do we say that by Bnei Noyach they also have this measurement? All right, so we're still in the middle of this whole discussion, bringing down an enormous amount of sources that discuss this. Again, left-hand column, page 3214, in the standard edition printed by Kehas. Left-hand column in the middle. Gam besefer choisen Yeshuais lahagoin maritz meizlish al divrei hatoisves techulin hanal kosav b'daf tesvav soif amud gimel. So there is a particular sage, great rabbi of more recent times, and he comments on these words of the Tosfos that we had last week from the tractate Chulin, where the Tosfos there says that the measurements don't apply to Bnei Noyach. So he explains as follows: Tosfos kasvukein, that which Tosfos write that it doesn't apply and any amount is just as forbidden for Bnei Noyach, aliba de Reish Lakish. They're only writing that according to the one opinion of Reish Lakish within the argument as to whether for a Jew less than the prescribed amount is still biblically forbidden. Because Reish Lakish holds that it is actually permitted. The Iker Kushiyasam Hila Reish Lakish. The main question that the Tosfos there is asking is according to Reish Lakish. Well, the Reish Lakish Stam Achila B'Chazayis. And according to Reish Lakish, when the Torah says you're not allowed to eat something, it means a kezayis, because without specifying, eating means at least a kezayis. Less than that, that's not eating. Call it tasting, whatever you want to call it, that's not eating. Less than a kezayis is not considered eating. Kezayis is not that much, so Reish Lakish holds that that is the normal amount of eating. Which means when the Torah says that a Jew may not eat something, it means kezayis. And for that matter, with that logic, when the Torah says that a non-Jew is not allowed to eat something, same thing. If eating is a kezayis, that's what a human being consumes, that's called eating. No difference between a Jew and the non-Jew. V'oid kosav, and furthermore, this Choisen Yeshuais writes, Da'afim timtze loymar, shekasvukin gamle Rabbi Yechanan. Even if you want to make the argument that the Tosfos says what they do, even according to Rabbi Yechanan, who says that for a Jew it is forbidden biblically to eat any amount, Mikol Makoim, nonetheless, Yesh loymar da Tosfos moidim. We could still say that the Tosfos would agree that when you say eat, just the word eating, it implies any amount, the most minute amount. It's just that Tosfos is going according to what they hold elsewhere in a different chapter over there. The be'aver the isbei arba v'chamisha zeisim lo mechayev b'chazayis mimenu. Tosfos holds that if there is a limb of an animal, that altogether the amount of flesh on that limb is 4 or 5 of these kezayis, 4 or 5 kezaysim in the plural. A person is not obligated for consuming one kezayis. De la'olam, because forever. Loi michayev ad sheyechal ha'ever shalem, k'mois shehu. The individual is not liable until he eats the entire limb as it naturally is. Mishum de loi toichal ha'nefesh im ha'basar. Because when the verse states that you shall not eat the soul with the flesh, mashma, that implies Ever Shalom, a complete limb. So when the Torah forbids a Jew to eat blood, it's a prohibition. A Jew is not allowed to eat blood. That's why kosher meat has to be koshered. And the primary process of making the meat after it's been properly slaughtered, making it kosher, is salting. And the purpose of the salting is to get out the blood. So Jews are not allowed to eat blood as a rule. There's some exceptions, but basically it's a very big prohibition, and we're not allowed to eat blood. The way the Torah states that is, don't eat the life, and we know that the life is in the blood, with the flesh. So he wants to suggest that Tosfos, which he's quoting, since they say that the prohibition is only eating the entire limb as it is. Otherwise, if a person just ate one kezayis of that limb, which contains several kezasim, even though he ate a full kezayis, he is not liable for this sin. V'im kain, and if so, beven noyach, when we are dealing with the Noachite, the non-Jew, nami also, tichsiv, because it says, and this goes back to the verse which is the source of how we know that Bnei Noach are not permitted to eat Eiver min hachai. Ach, basar benafshoy, damoy lo yisaychelu. It says, you shall not eat flesh with its life and the blood. Nami Eiver Shalem mashma. The wording there is very similar to the wording of the verse we quoted before, which also implies a complete, a whole limb. V'loy b'mashu basar lechud, and not just some small amount of meat. So from there he wants to explain that the Tosfos holds that Bnei Noach are also in the same category as far as the measurement of how much they cannot eat, of what they're not allowed to eat, like the Jew, which is not even a kezayis, more than that, but it has to be a whole limb of the animal. The Harambam and Maimonides, Nami also, Lishitosoi Ozil, he also goes according to his opinion. The Soiver, the Chamishim Hilchis Maicholas Asoros, Maimonides in chapter 5 of his laws of forbidden foods says, the Be'ever the Ispe Kamazesim, that a limb that contains several kezayises, a number of kezasim, Imachal kezayis mimenu, if the person ate one kezayis of that, Nami mechayev, he is also liable. So clearly the Rambam does not hold like we just said that the Tosfos says, but the Rambam, his opinion is that one kezayis of an entire limb is enough to make the person liable. Im kain, if so, dum yedachi michayev nami ben noyach im achal mashehu me'ever gadol. Ad kan l'shoinoi. So according to that, the ben noyach would be the same thing, meaning not a kezayis if a ben noyach ate any amount. You know, it's if Rambam does not agree with the Tosfos, and the Rambam holds for a Jew that if there is a limb that is forbidden for the Jew to eat, so long as he ate one kezayis of that limb, which contains many kezasim, he now is liable for the punishment. Full. Similarly, going along with that logic, since the verse is such a similar verse to the other verse, and the Rambam is not interpreting the verse to say you have to eat the whole limb. So now, for the Ben Noyach, for him to eat a piece of meat that is Eiver Minachai, he need not eat the entire limb, and he also need not eat a kezayis as the Jew would need to eat a kezayis, because that doesn't apply. So how much would he need to eat? Well, just like the Jew, a kezayis is the amount and not the entire limb. So for the Ben Noyach, the tiniest amount would be the amount that would make him liable for the punishment, and not the entire limb. All right, that's the quote of this Choisen Yeshuais. V'im kain, and if so, l'divrei shneim, according to the opinion of both of them, bat l'machloikes, then there's no dispute here. V'chol afia, everybody, shavin is equal to le'nem r'shir and l'bnei noyach, that these measurements were not given for the bnei noyach. Either way you look at it, it comes out that bnei noyach don't have a measurement. They don't have this concept. Either they have to eat an entire limb, and so would the Jew, or the Jew has to eat at least one kezayis, because that's the measurement given for Jews, and the ben noyach doesn't have to eat the entire limb either. We're being consistent, but not kezayis. That's a Jewish thing. So what does he have to eat in order to be liable? Any amount. So either way you look at it, the measurements were not given for bnei noyach. Now the S'dei Chemed is sending us to look at another section in this encyclopedia of his, where he wrote about this. And also another contemporary, the book called Beis Shloimoi, he also writes, the ein raya midivra toisvis. There's no proof from these words of the toisvis. The yesh loimer, for we can say that toisvis loy nachsu lazeh bekushiyasam. Toisvis is not dealing with this in their question. Well, the pshitus hikshu, and they're just asking a very simple question. For Rabbeinu B'Tzalel HaKoyen, Bagoyis Mara HaKoyen, Shebeshas Tfus Ram, S'dei Loimar, the Gama Toisvis Seivrim Karambam, the Ein Shir LeBen Noyach V'Shakim V'Tari Bazeh Ayin Sham. So he's giving us another reference, a commentary called Mare Kohen, and it's printed in the standard Talmud. And he also says over there that the Tosfos actually hold the same as the Rambam, that measurements, amounts were not given for Bnei Noyach, and he has a whole discussion about that, this note called the Mareh going back and forth. So as long as we think that the S'dei Chemed over here is being tremendously detailed and so long, actually he's not as long as he could have been. He's giving us references here and there, and we could look it up over there and see in more detail what each one of them holds. Bottom line is, according to these opinions, everyone holds, and there is no dispute about this matter, that shiurim were not given for Bnei Noyach. Okay, so some say the Tosfos holds that they were, but the way we're explaining it now, Tosfos agrees with the Rambam that there are no measurements for Bnei Noyach, and whatever is forbidden for a Ben Noyach, the slightest, tiniest amount is not only forbidden, but is also punishable, just like if he ate a kezayis or more. Last paragraph on page 3214, left-hand column. V'roisi lehagoin shoylu meishiv b'tinyana chelik aleph siman yudal daf ches amud beis karev l'soifoi. And I saw in a particular book named Shoyelu Meishiv, and he's telling us exactly where it is over there, Shekosav, that he wrote as follows, and he quotes, Nistapakti, I am in doubt. I had a doubt, Beven Noyach, with regards to the Ben Noyach. She'azharason zoi, himisason. Now we know there's a rule. By Bnei Noyach, the Torah is very strict with them. And for Bnei Noach, their warning is their death penalty. Meaning, when it comes to the Jew, and there are many capital offenses. However, in order for a Jew to be able to be biblically punished for any transgression, there needs to be a warning. And oftentimes in the Talmud, when we're discussing a certain prohibition for a Jew, the question then becomes, where's the warning? So there needs to be a warning, some verse that's teaching us a warning, and then there needs to be the actual prohibition with a punishment. Can't just say, well, I warned you not to do it, and therefore you did it to get killed. Whereas by Bnei Noach, we say that their warning is their death penalty. So there's like, so to say, no second chance. You can't plead ignorance, basically. So when the Torah says that a Ben Noach, a non-Jew, is forbidden to do this and this, that means, as a rule, that it's a capital offense, and that he would be put to death. So now he's asking another question, very interesting. So this Shoyal Meshiv says, does it apply in the same way as it does to a Jew? Meaning, the ein ne'noshin ad ben yud gimel shanim. This is a practical question as well. I mean, even though today there is no punishment, no death sentence for a non-Jew that transgresses the 7 Noachide laws, but we still want to know this, as you're going to understand. For a Jew, under age 13, whatever the child, the minor, transgressed, whatever he did, doesn't count. If he's under 13, and you all probably know the term bar mitzvah, under 13, not liable for anything, as a rule. Again, almost everything has exceptions, but let's just keep this as a rule with almost no exceptions. Anything a Jewish boy under age 13 does, he does not get the punishment. Whether the punishment is lashes, whether the punishment is payment, to pay double or more, whether the punishment is the death sentence, no punishment is administered to the child. He is an infant. For practical purposes of this discussion, a 12-and-a-half-year-old boy is equal to a 12-month-old boy. Same thing. If he murdered intentionally, premeditated, no punishment, biblically. He's irresponsible. He's not responsible for his deeds. He's a minor. Age 13, he's an adult. By Jewish law, full-fledged adulthood for a Jewish boy is 13. 18, nothing. 21, nothing. Those are all fine ages in whatever countries, whatever time period we're living in today. You know, you have to be a certain age to be able to buy alcohol or tobacco, and now drugs. Jewish law, it's 13. There's no difference between a 13-year-old and a 30-year-old. Okay. So now the question becomes, what about Bnei Noach? That's a measurement. That's a certain age. So how does it work by Bnei Noach? At what age do they become punished for transgressing? By Jews, it's very clear. 13 for the boy. V'nireh, and it seems, this is what the Shoyal Meshiv is saying, the beven Noach, that by the Noachite, af koton ne'enash, even a child, a minor, would get punished. Even if he is underage. V'raya, and a proof to this, meharambam b'tshi'i mimalachim, halacha yud. The Rambam, chapter 9 of the Laws of Kings, which is where he speaks primarily about the Noachide laws. Law number 10, halacha 10. Shekosav, that the Rambam wrote, Deloy nitnu shiurin livnei noyach. He writes those words clearly. So we know what the Rambam holds about what we're discussing the whole time before with Kazayas and all that. That measurements, amounts, these types of things were not given to Bnei Noyach. Which he's suggesting would imply ages as well. Well, if he's and according to this, Haharosh Kosav Bitshuva Reish Klal Tezayin, the Gamashir Diish, Humi Ben Yud Gimel Shanim, Hu Allah Mesham Sinai. The Rosh, which is sort of a contemporary of the Rambam, meaning he's from the earlier commentaries as opposed to these later ones that we're quoting over here. The Rosh is in the same category as Tosfos and the Rambam. So the Rosh, which is an abbreviation for Rabbeinu Asher, the Rosh maintains that the way that we know that a boy becomes obligated in all Jewish law from age 13, that is a halakha l'Moshe Sinai. That is in the category of the oral tradition that God gave Moshe at Sinai. There is a long list of things that are not written in the Bible, in the actual 5 books. And the way we know them is because this is what God told Moses. All amounts, measurements, fall into that category. And in the Jewish religion, trust me, it gets really technical, and measurements to the smallest, minutest amount are very relevant and can make a world of a difference. Literally, life and death. They're measurements of fist, hand breadth, tefach. There's a finger, you have to know which finger and which person and which... There's an amma. It just goes on, and it's very, very specific and very detailed, and applies in so many rules, more than you can probably imagine. Amongst those measurements is the age. That's also a measurement. A person's age is a form of measurement. The age of the person. So 13 years old, says the Rosh, is how we know bar mitzvah. Kedomru shiurin v'chatzitzin halacha l'Moshe Sinai. As the statement made, that these measurements are, in fact, like we just said, halakha l'Moshe Sinai. And halakha l'Moshe Sinai only applies to Jews. Well, lefizeh, so according to this, kivan deloy nitnu shiurin livnei noyach, since shiurim, measurements of any form, were not given for bnei noyach, mimela, automatically, yesh loymar, we now can say, degam befachos miyud gimel shanim chayav, that even less than 13 of ben noyach is liable. Now the obvious question is, well then, what is the age of a ben noyach? If there is no set age, no one could dare think in the right mind that if a 2-year-old does something, he's liable to be punished. Right? A 2-year-old child committed the worst sin, the worst crime. He transgressed the prohibition. Kid's 2 years old. What does he know? So how do you work it? By the Jew, it's very simple. 13 years old. So, kol sheigia lichlal da'as. As long as this particular individual reached the stage of intelligence. In other words, you would need to judge every case on its own merits. So you can have 2 individual bnei noyach that are the exact same age, born on the same day. One of them is liable, one of them is not, because one of them is intelligent and the other one is not yet. Now, according to this, seemingly, it's not only under age 13. It might even mean that someone over 13 is not liable. He might be 14 years old, and we say, he's not mature enough. He doesn't really know what he's doing. He's still just a kid. Okay? By a Jew, you can't say that. He's 13 years old. Unless he is mentally deranged, unless he is insane, legally, by Jewish law. But otherwise, you can't say, well, he's just a kid. That doesn't work. Just like you can't say that. And again, these laws, even in the United States today, they get very technical. And if a person committed a certain crime a minute before midnight of his birthday, and he's still considered legally a minor, he's a minor. And if it happened a minute after midnight, he's considered an adult. I mean, they got to draw the line somewhere. No one is professing to say that, that moment he's suddenly, but we draw the line at some point. Same thing by the Jew. Bar mitzvah is bar mitzvah, that's it. What about the non-Jew? Each individual on his own intelligence. So it could be much younger than 13, and perhaps much older than 13. And this could be like the age of the youngsters, meaning very young. It could be much less than 13 years old. We can say, no, this 10-year-old child, this 8-year-old child, he is intelligent enough to understand what he's doing, and he knows right from wrong, and therefore he would be able to be punished, even though he is technically a minor. Because by Bnei Noyach, there's no such thing as a minor or an adult, as far as this goes. Viraya nirali, and it seems to me I have a proof. The guf hakra, the very text itself, the nitztavu b'nei noyach, that the b'nei noyach are commanded. The Talmud discusses how do we know that b'nei noyach are commanded to keep these things. Where do we know it from? All right. So what does the verse say? Huvayitzav al ha'adam leimor. The verse says, and he, referring to God, commanded man, saying. That's what it says. That's what the verse says in Genesis. How old was man, Adam, at the time? How old was he? Several hours old? Now, you could say, well, he was created with the intelligence and with the maturity of... Doesn't matter. So in other words, you don't have to wait for 13 years from the time that he was created, since he's intelligent enough. If, let's just say, he was physically the maturity of a 20-year-old or so, and let's just say that intellectually he was, you're talking about the first man ever that was created by Hashem, by God Almighty himself. This is the perfect man, until he sins. This is the perfect being. So he was definitely very mature, very intelligent, to say the least. And that's why you can command him, and you can hold him responsible and liable. Don't go by his passport age. Passport age says, created today. That doesn't mean anything. Why? Because this is before the Torah was given, and he's not a Jew. He's a non-Jew. And can't call him literally a Ben Noyach, because Ben Noyach was 10 generations later, his descendant. But technically, he's a Ben Noyach. In other words, a non-Jew. So that's an interesting proof. And an additional proof. The fact that the Rambam wrote in the 14th halakha there, the Rambam explains to us that Bnei Noyach are liable, and he explains that the reason why in the story with Jacob, Yaakov, and his daughter Dinah, who was kidnapped, abducted, she was raped, and then her two brothers, Shimon and Levi, took the law into their own hands, and they wiped out the entire city. They killed all of the city of Shechem. Rambam brings this down in these laws where he's discussing the 7 Loachite laws, and he says, this is why the people of Shechem were punished. V'nischayvu hariga, and they were liable for the death penalty. Mishum, because, says the Rambam, Shechem gozal, vehem yadu v'lo danuhu. Shechem committed at least one of the 7 halachite prohibitions. He stole. Kidnapping is a capital offense. He stole. All right, that explains him. What about the rest of the city? And they didn't bring him to justice. What is one of the 7 halachite commandments? The only positive one out of the 7. The other ones are don'ts. What is the only one positive one? That you have to have a court system. That you have to judge people to make sure they keep the 6. They didn't judge them. They failed. That means that entire city had transgressed by not bringing to justice this individual. And now, listen to this proof. That's what Maimonides says. And now he adds, but they killed the children as well over there. The kashe, and its difficulty. Lama nehergu haktanim. Why did they kill the children? It's one thing to kill all of the adults for saying that they didn't do what they had to do. They didn't have a court system, and every adult is responsible, and you can't just, pass it on to the next person. But the children? What they do wrong? Val karchin. So we must say, the bivnei noyach lo shayach hashiur. That when it comes to bnei noyach, there is no age. There's no statute of an age. V'gam haktanim nischayvu. And even the children were liable. Eilu toiref divrei katre bazeh. This is the basic thrust of his words, what he says about this. And he's extremely elaborate, and he goes on one topic to the next as he normally does. So again, the S'dei Chemed is bringing us an abridged version of this Shoyel Meishiv. So it's very lengthy over there, he's telling us. But that's how he says it. He brings these proofs, these logical proofs, and his nuances in the Rambam to show that measurements are not given to Bnei Noyach, and there's no such thing as an age. Doesn't matter. And these are proofs that he brings. Says the S'dei Chemed, "Utmioli al goin mufla shekemoisoi." It's bewildering to me, on such an amazing genius like him, shlei ra divrei harambam, that he didn't see the words of the Rambam. How could he have missed the explicit words of Maimonides? Shebeperek asiri halacha beis, that in chapter 10 of the Laws of Kings, halacha 2, shekosav, that the Rambam wrote, Ula oilam ein oinshin mehem loy katon v'loy cheresh v'loy shoite, and you never punish amongst the non-Jews, just like by the Jews, not a minor, nor a deaf mute, nor someone who is insane. Lefi she'enam b'nei mitzvahs, because they are not in the category of people that are commanded. Atkan. And the same applies to Jews. You can only punish someone who is commanded. And these unfortunate individuals are a category of people which cannot be held responsible and liable. And therefore they are not punished, no matter what they do. And we always bunch them together. It's a category throughout the whole Talmud. Cheresh, shoite, katan. Cheresh is someone who's deaf mute, cannot hear nor speak. Katan, under bar mitzvah. And shoite is, by Jewish law, someone who's legally insane. The Rambam says the same thing about Bnei Noyach. And he includes katan. He doesn't just say cheresh and shoite. He says katan. So what's going on? How did he miss that? How can you say that that's why even the children in Shechem were killed? because there's no measurements. The Rambam says clearly that a katan of the Bnei Noach is not punished ever. V'hinei, Harambam b'shenim hilchas ishus din yud kosav. Now, let's go to a different place in the Rambam. The Rambam, in chapter 2 of the laws of marriage, law number 10, in chapter 2, he wrote as follows. Habein, the boy, Misha Yivaled, from the moment of his birth, Achiyeh ben Yud Gimel Shana, until he is 13 years of age, Nikra Katan, V'nikra Tinoik, V'chuli, is called a Katan, a minor, and he's called a Tinoik, which is another technical term for a minor. So there the Rambam is introducing us to the technical terms that he uses throughout. So he's telling us the definition of a Jewish boy from the moment he's born until he turns 13, he is a Katan, he is a Tinoik. Uvesoif haperik kosav, and at the end of that very same chapter, the Rambam writes, Nimtzeu, he sums it up. It comes out, Kol hashemos shebiyarnu inyanom, all of these terms that we've explained each one of them, because he gave us a whole list of terms in that chapter, in those chapters. Esrim shemos, they are a total of 20 names, 20 terms, when it comes to maturity and to male and female and relations and things like that. He's using 20 terms. Ve'eluhain, and then he lists them. Kiddushin, which is a technical term, which in English they call it a betrothal, which, I mean, it's hard to use an English word because it's a technical Jewish law act. It's basically stage 1 of marriage by Jewish law. V'chulu, etc. And then he lists a whole bunch. Katan, and one of the terms that the Rambam introduced us to, one of the 20 is katan. Sris chama, that would be someone who is sterile by birth, by nature. You know, as opposed to someone who had a procedure done to them. Sris chama, someone who was born naturally unable to reproduce. V'chulu, etc. Then the Rambam says, after he gives you the list of all 20, Sim kol Hashem meseidulu maschatamid. Place all of these terms right in front of you, always. And don't ever let these concepts drift away from your eyes. So that we don't need to explain them every time we use these terms. Always, whenever I learned that particular halakha in the Rambam, I always am impressed from anew. He gets almost personal. It's like you hear him as he's your teacher. It's a pedagogue of a pupil-teacher relationship. And the Rambam warns you, and he says, these terms came up, I explained each one of them, and we're going to be using them from now on. I don't expect you to forget them. I don't need to explain them. From now on, I am taking for granted you know the exact definition and how these 20 terms are used. That's what he says there. So now, why are we bringing this in? Hine, lefi zeh, according to this, mashma, the implication is, to mashakosav kana Rambam, that which the Rambam writes over here, meaning going back to the laws of kings, where he's talking about the Bnei Noach getting punished, that you don't punish a katan. He means till age 13, he's called a katan, you don't punish him. Until he's a full-fledged 13-year-old. So, it's a very interesting approach. Instead of saying, well, when the Rambam wrote that, he was talking about Jews. He didn't say that. He's very precise, he's very specific, and when it came to those 20 terms, he was really exact. Now, if some of those do not apply to Bnei Noach, they don't apply. For example, the word Kiddushin. Kiddushin may not apply to Bnei Noach. Okay, so then he'll never use the word Kiddushin when he's talking about the marriage of two Bnei Noach. Fine. But the Rambam taught us a word katan, a human being, a male that is, because for a girl it's kitana, a male who is a katan. He didn't tell us a Jew who's under 13. He said it's from the day of birth of a boy until his 13th birthday. That's how the Rambam defined it. And he said, don't forget these terms. I don't have to redefine them. Okay. So then, a number of books later, fast forward several months of studying Rambam, fast forward, whatever it is, several hundred chapters, and then, at the very end, when he's talking about punishing Bnei Noach, he says, a katan cannot be punished. He's not held responsible for his actions. Why should we change the definition of katan? He taught us katan means a boy from birth till age 13. It applies to a non-Jew as well. So he wants to suggest from the Rambam that under age 13, a ben Noach is not responsible. Even though the same Rambam said that the shiurim, the measurements, are not given for bnei Noach. Okay? That means kazayis. That means all these other measurements. But not age. It also makes sense. I mean, if he's a child, then how is he held accountable? Unless you're going to take the approach that we said before, that each person has to be judged on his own intelligence, on his own merits, and his own maturity. No. And this is not like the words of the great genius, the Shoyel Umeshiv, that he clearly said that what we learned before, that there is no age when it comes to non-Jews, and you just have to judge every single individual on his own intelligence. Well, and according to the words of the Rambam, according to this implication that we just suggested, tzarich loymar, we need to say, the b'maise Shechem. Let's go back to Shechem, because now we have a real problem with that. We have a problem with Shechem. Why did they kill out everybody? So the way the Shoyel Umeshiv wanted to say, he says, you see, they even killed children, because everybody is accountable. But now that we're saying, no, there's no such thing as killing a child under age 13. So what happened by Shechem? So now he says, Lehargu es apachos miben shloish esrei shana v'yom echad. Indeed, they did not kill any male under age 13. If he wasn't fully 13, he didn't reach his 13th birthday, they did not kill him. V'chol shelo yigiu lezeh nichlolim b'ma she'amar hakasuv v'es kol chelam v'es kol tapam v'es neshehem shavu v'yavoizu. See, the verse says as follows. When it describes what Shimon and Levi did, they killed out the whole city, it says. And then it says, the verse states clearly, this is right there in the written Torah. What does it say? So we quote, all of the spoils and all of the, well, the word is tapam, which you can translate as infants, young children, and all of the wives, they took as captives. So they clearly did not kill the women. They clearly did not kill infants. And of course, all the animals. This is now, the loot. Okay. So he's saying now, guess what? When it says that they did not kill the children, that must mean anybody under age 13. All the boys under age 13 fall into the category of being young children. That's what we have to say. She'oisam shelo yigiu leminyan hashanim shavu oisam. For those that did not reach the appropriate age, they took them as captives. V'lo hargum, and they did not kill them. Shaloi kedivid argoyin, not like the words of the great genius, the Shoel Umeshiv. Shekol shegil lechlal das neherag. That anybody reached the point of intelligence was killed. Shimon and Levi judged each child on his own merits. This 10-year-old, he is so immature. He is so silly. Okay, can't kill him. Look at that 9-year-old. He should know better. He should have made sure that they set up courts. Kill him. That's how he learned. Even if he did not reach the age. So that's how he explained it. That they killed every child as long as he had intelligence and was mature and responsible enough, even though he didn't reach age 13. Now we're saying no such thing. We're saying that it can't be, and that according to the Rambam, anybody under 13 couldn't have been killed, and they all fall into the category, no matter how intelligent and how mature they seem to be, they're all minors, and they weren't killed. So from this we see so far that according to the Shoel Umeshiv, there is no real age when it comes to non-Jews, but according to the S'dei Chemed, the way he understands the Rambam, there definitely is, and it's the same age as Jews. Now in parentheses. El shebe'emes kashe, the truth is though, it's really difficult l'tzayer to picture eich yochlu lahavdil ulhakir b'shas apam v'chamasam. Practically speaking, to take the approach that we're saying is really kind of difficult. It sounds nice theoretically, but try to envision what's happening there in Shechem. At the time of their anger, Shimon and Levi are really angry. And by the way, just parenthetically, Shimon and Levi were 13 at the time. It was actually the day of Levi turned 13. It was on his birthday. That's how the Rebbe Melech HaMashiach explains it, that Levi turned 13 that day. But that's a side point. Shimon and Levi, they're really, really, to use our terms, acting in a very hot-headed way. They're really upset what was done to their sister. They did not consult with their father, which he was upset about. They didn't ask Jacob. They understood Sheva Mitzvahs Bnei Noach, kidnapping, having a set court system. They all transgressed. Let's go for it. Okay? And they went out to kill them all. Now imagine, how can they differentiate at the time of their anger between ben shloish esrei shanim levein ben shloish esrei v'yem echad v'hevi saibros? How could they tell the difference between a kid who is legally, technically full 13 years old and one who's not yet? Would they ask each person, prove your age? How's that work? This is one day, they wiped everybody out. How could they tell? And especially since it's not just the 13th birthday, for a Jew that even, he has to have 2 pubic hairs after his 13th birthday. So that makes it even more complicated. So how in the world were they able to differentiate each child? They're killing a whole city. And that's not just a question on the way that we're understanding the Rambam, that this was it. Under 13 they didn't kill, 13 they killed. Even according to the Shoel Umeshiv, that they killed out younger than 13 as well. He says even the ones under 13 had to be killed. But it doesn't mean an infant, a 2-year-old. Even the Shoel Umeshiv agrees. I mean, the verse says that they took as captives the infants or the young children. So, according to him, what they do over here? Each child they tested his intelligence to see if he's responsible or not. Because it doesn't go by age. Fine. So what does it go by? Intelligence. Responsibility. How could they check that when they're in the heat of killing out a whole city all in one day? So it's not like it's only a problem for us. It's a problem for the Shoel Umeshiv as well. How could they recognize in an instant, in a moment, in their heat of anger, between the children that did reach the intelligent maturity level and those that did not? And this does need further investigation. So this is parenthetical, because it really makes no difference, because we do know that they killed out Shem. We do know that they killed out all the males except for the Taf, the little children. So any way you look at it, this is a separate discussion, but it's a problem. According to the S'dei Chemed, that under 13 they didn't kill, 13 and up they killed. How are you supposed to tell who's 13 and who's not? And according to Shalom Meshiv, it's also a problem that he says age means nothing. Okay, what does? Intelligence. Well, then how are you supposed to judge the intelligence? That's also a problem. Let's try to do the next paragraph unless we really run out of time. So we're on page Aleph Taf Reish Ches. In the middle of the right-hand column, the paragraph right in the middle starts Hein. Hein emes, it's true. Sheyesh lo lagoyin shoylo meshiv rav tana de mesayelei. He actually does have, truth be said, says the S'dei Chemed, that this opinion of this great genius, which I just disagreed with and refuted him, he actually does have a very great support. Someone who holds like him too. And that is Mar Nihu Hagoyin Chasam Soifer B'Cheluk Yerodei Siman Shin Yud Zayin. The great famous genius, the Chasam Soifer, which he lived in Hungary, and he is very famous, very well known, and he wrote many books and many responsa in Jewish law, and we really rely on what he writes to a very, very great degree. And he lived not that long ago, also about 150 years ago or so. Shekosav, the Chasam Soifer writes as follows: Shenishal meirav echad, that he was asked by one rabbi, Al Mashikosav Rambam, with regard to that which the Rambam writes, Dein manishi mehem like cotton v'loy cherish v'chulu, what we just quoted before, that the Rambam says you cannot punish from the non-Jews, the Bnei Noach, not a child, a katan under bar mitzvah, not a katan, a minor, nor someone who's deaf mute, etc. According to the Rambam, that all these measurements were only given for the Jews. And the Rosh that we quoted before, he says the age of maturity for male and female, 13 for the boy, 12 for the girl, all those things are shiurim, they are these measurements, and they all part of this halakha l'Moshe miSinai, this oral tradition, which is only applying to the Jews. The cave and change shiurim leven noyach, and since we know there are no measurements for the Bnei Noach, lama yipater hakatan, why should a child under a certain age be exempt? That's the question that someone asked the S'dei Chemed. The why, in fact, if it is a shear, it is a set age, and that should only apply to Jews. V'heishiv, and he answered, he responded, Ditrei gavne katan ika. There are two types of katan. When we speak of minor, there are two types. Aleph, A, the first type, Tinoik ben yoimoy, a newborn infant, a child the day he's born. Ein shum svara lo anshoy. There's absolutely no logic, no thought at all to punish him. The onus patur, gam beben noyach v'chulu. Someone who is coerced, someone who is out of his control, is exempt not only by the Jewish people, even by a ben noyach. If a ben noyach is forced to transgress at gunpoint, someone tells him to transgress any one of the seven, and literally his life is on the line. The person is being forced, and he transgresses, no punishment, no problem, no transgression. Well, same thing when you have an infant doing something wrong, that's the same idea. Nothing. Even if you're going to say that there's no age limitation, but can't be a newborn, can't be an infant. That's one type of a katan. And that, of course, you cannot punish bnei noyach. Beis, the second type, katan shegiel palgus ruven gedolim chikre leiv. Someone who reaches, he's a child, but he's got intelligence. He's mature. To be Yisrael, halakha l'meishim Sinai, she'ein masav klum at yovish tei sayros achash noisav. When it comes to the Jew, this is part of the halakha l'meishim Sinai, the oral tradition, that what he does doesn't count for anything until we have both requirements. He reached age 13 on the calendar, and he has the 2 pubic hairs. Only then can it count, as far as transgression, as far as doing a mitzvah, as far as anything is concerned. And then at that point, even if his mind is not so bright, he isn't so intelligent. He doesn't really have a great understanding. As long as he's not actually a shoite, insane, as long as he's not legally, literally, mentally insane, and then he just throws in the parentheses very briefly what that means, then he rips up his clothing. As long as he's not like that it doesn't just walk around and just rip up his clothes, or for that matter, walk out naked. Things which you don't have to be too intelligent, it's just a very basic maturity that you know what to do and what not to do. Even if he's very shallow and he has a very low IQ and he's really not intelligent, doesn't matter. He reached a certain age and he has a certain physical maturity, that's it. He's not a katan. That's the second type of a katan. Under age 13 and doesn't have the hair. V'amnam ben noyach deloy nitan lam shiurim, but bnei noyach, who they don't have these set amounts of measurements, kol shesichloi shalom karaui. This is the Chaim Sofer says. As long as his mind is properly intelligent, ukein b'bava basra daf kufnun hayom beis, the masber ulei umasber heve gadol. That as long as they can explain something to him and he can explain it back, that is called an adult. And less than that, he's called a minor. So the Chaim Sofer does seem to say like the Shoyel Meshiv. So the S'dei Chemed says, in all honesty, I have to really say that the Shoyel Meshiv does really have someone who's very solid, who holds like him. Rambam, al pi tuyov oineshu. And that's why Maimonides writes that if he's under a certain age or a certain type of intelligence, that if he is enticed to do something, he's not punished because that's considered coercion, because he doesn't have enough intelligence. Hooray! So it comes out that he is ready to explain the above mentioned words of the Rambam. That when the Rambam says you don't punish a katan of bnei noyach, you don't punish a child, you have to, according to him, the Rambam means that you don't punish someone who doesn't have intelligence. But once he reaches intelligence, ma'anishim, you do punish him, even though he's not 13. And this is just like the opinion of the Shoylu Meshiv, that says that according to the Rambam, 13 is not what plays the role. Every child has to be judged individually. So yes, of course it's true. They're not disagreeing with the Rambam. The Rambam says you don't punish a katan. So instead of taking the understanding that we had before, that katan is just like by a Jew, and the Rambam defined what a katan means, and it's age 13, and he has the pubic hairs, and that's it. No, we have to say that when it comes to Ben Noyach, the definition of katan is a bit different. And it means every individual has to be judged accordingly. It means the child who does not have intellectual maturity of responsibility. Okay? Then he's a katan, and then the words of the Rambam apply, you don't punish him. But if he is intelligent, he's a 10-year-old who's intelligent, then they're going to say, the Chasam Sofer and the Sheil Meshiv say he's not a katan. Only a Jew under 13 is a katan. What makes this kid a minor? He's very intelligent. Mikol Mokoim, nonetheless, though, says the S'dei Chemed, Yesh li tmoya. We do have a question, though. Shehaya lo lahasker divrei Rambam b'din oynish l'katan. The Chasam Sofer should have mentioned what the Rambam speaks about not punishing a katan. The lichtoi, and he should have written sheyesh l'chalak bin katan l'katan kanis gadol, and he should have made this distinction between one katan and another. In other words, he should have addressed the Rambam statement that we don't punish a katan of a ben noyach, and he didn't address that, the Chasam Sofer. V'gam al hagoyin Chasam Sofer yesh litmoya shlo yizkir medivir Rambam b'shnei b'sheni mehilches ishus hanal demashma shaloi kidvarav. And also, question on the Chasam Sofer, he didn't mention that Rambam that we brought in from the laws of marriage, where the Rambam listed 20 terms, including katan, and he said, from now on, when I use these terms, know what I mean. Why didn't he address that either? Because that clearly implies that the Rambam does not hold like this, like they're trying to say in him, because of what we said before, that the katan is defined, and he uses the same word katan, so why make a distinction between a non-Jew and a Jew if you're using the same term, like we said above. V'tzarich iyun. So therefore, he's leaving it that we do need to investigate and understand the Shoylu Meshiv and the Chasam Sofer. All right, we are out of time for now. Like to wish everybody much success in the study, and most important, in the promoting and observing the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noyach, in order to make this world the perfect world that it was created for, with the complete revelation of Mashiach now. Thank you.